think I'd try this a new way. I'm gonna show you the tricks that I know. I'm getting tired of talking, and I need more of a show right now. It's time that you made your mind up, 'cause lately all it ever does is change. Feels like we're only talking, going round and around, back around. I will fight like no other every day. I won't stop like the others. I will stay. 'Cause now is the right time, and I'm feeling alright. I'm playing your game like I know I can win right now. You got me on tonight, 'cause loving you is like I'm walking a tightrope so high. I won't be turning around, no, I won't be turning around. It's the right time, I'm feeling alright. I'm playing your game like I will win tonight. I think I'll do it on my way. I'm gonna show you what I'm going through, get you out of your comfort zone, 'cause I need more of the truth right now. It's time that you made your mind up, 'cause lately all it ever does is change. Feels like we're only talking, going round and around, back around. I will fight like no other every day. I won't stop like the others. I will stay. 'Cause now is the right time, and I'm feeling alright. I'm playing your game like I know I can win right now. You got me on tonight, 'cause loving you is like I'm walking a tightrope so high. I won't be turning around, no, I won't be turning around. It's the right time, I'm feeling alright. I'm playing your game like I will win tonight. Don't forget it, don't forget it, don't forget it. We'll turn this around. Don't forget it, don't forget it, don't forget it. We'll turn this around.
Thanks for tuning in to Geeksvana's Drone News Live.
Yes, sir.
Get involved live with your comments and opinions. Your views count.
Hey everybody, welcome to Geeksvana Live. It's great to see you all in the house this evening. Thank you very much for joining us. Now tonight I have a very special guest who is Dr. Pascal Lee. I have a very short introduction to play for him in a few moments, but I actually just want to do a very quick sound check as we had a few technical issues just before going on air. So hi Pascal, how are you?
Good, how are you? Hi, everybody.
I'm very good, thank you. So Andy, our moderator, can you let me know if you... Sorry? Okay, excellent. I've just been told from the other room that we can hear you, that you're a little bit quiet, but we can hear you. That's fantastic news because I wasn't sure whether if it was going to work in this particular setup. Well, Pascal, thank you so much for joining us this evening. I'm just going to play a very quick, short introductory, which is actually the intro from our original interview, which just explains to people where Devon Island is and what we can expect. I'll just play that out now. It'll be about 60 seconds. Located in the high Arctic, it is often referred to as Mars on Earth. The Haughton crater is considered one of the Earth's best analogue sites for Mars and the Moon. It is here that the Haughton Mars Project, an international multidisciplinary field research project dedicated to advancing planetary science and exploration, find themselves on the cutting edge of drone technology and development, looking to make drones an essential part of a future manned mission to Mars. Today, I am joined by the director of the Haughton Mars Project to discuss how drones are to become a key element of space exploration, including the caves on the Moon and Mars, as well as the astronaut smart glove designed to aid human-machine interface when controlling drones on Mars. Dr. Pascal Lee is the founder and chairman of the Mars Institute, director of the NASA Haughton Mars Project, and senior planetary scientist with the SETI Institute. Would help if I turn my microphone back on after coming back up the video there. So as the introduction explained, Pascal works in some very interesting science, and you may wonder why somebody from the Haughton Mars Project and the founder of the Mars Institute might be coming onto a drone channel, and that is basically due to Pascal's advanced work in this particular field. So yes, so Pascal, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your work?
Well, I'm a planetary scientist, so I'm interested in the exploration of planets and trying to understand the origin, the evolution of planets, and whether or not they might harbor life, or whether or not conditions might be suitable on them for life. And drones. So in order to do that, one of the ways I study Mars, for example, or the Moon, is to go to places on Earth that are somehow similar in specific ways, in a meaningful way, with to Mars or the Moon. And Devon Island in the high Arctic is one such place. We call it Mars on Earth. It's one of the most Mars-like places on our planet. And I've been going up there every summer now for the past quarter century.
Wow.
I often say that I live in California, but I have yet to spend a summer in California. You know what it's like? I spend all my summers on this godforsaken island in the Arctic. But the place is wonderful. It's one of the most Mars-like places on our planet. You're sort of journeying to another world, essentially.
Absolutely.
Certainly compared to California, every year when we go there. Now, so what do we do there? Well, we study the place. We are interested in the geology of Devon Island, which looks very much like Mars, with differences, of course. And we're also interested in the search for life there, because life is there in the Arctic, even in the cold. But it tends to hide. It hides in recesses of the rocks and in the ground, away from intense ultraviolet light, away from the cold, away from the dryness that happens at the very surface. So already there, life is pushed to sort of an extreme. It's in recess, and so we go there to study the place. And one thing that has really revolutionized field work, field science in general, be it geology or biology, is drones. Drones have come onto the scene, in a sort of a mass market way in the past few years, and they have completely changed the way geologists, for example, can study the places that they want to investigate. The instantaneous perspective on what you're looking at, on what you're seeing. It gives you this overview of the context of where you are finding extreme life, for example.
Absolutely.
And so, as much as I enjoy flying drones, as any person would sort of in my private time, just for fun, I actually use drones as a game-changing tool in our field work in geology here on Earth. And it doesn't take a stretch to understand very quickly that this is likely to revolutionize as well how we are going to study other worlds with a surface to image, with life to search for, or even to just understand better how we will use drones for that purpose.
Absolutely.
And so I'm here to chat with you today about, how drones might be used on other worlds and how different they might be from the ones on the Earth.
Indeed, which there are even differences, of course, between the drones on the Moon, Mars, and even at different levels of Mars, of course, which I've learned from our previous discussions on drones in space, as it were. Just to very quickly say hello to everybody in the chat. Really great to see you all. Desmond, Darren, Novice Quads, Chris Hope, Phantom Flight 101, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you as well for anyone that's popped across from the very kind SETI Institute retweets of it. I have to say that's one of my bucket list things. I didn't realize it was on my bucket list until it happened to be retweeted by the SETI Institute, but there we go. So the type of control, the type of the way that you're going to actually be able to fly drones is of course going to be very, very different, because there are of course so many different types of drone that are being considered in space exploration, aren't there? There of course there are the ones which are like the Mars helicopter, the Dragonfly drone, etc., which aren't necessarily expected to be flown via controller or anything by an individual person on the surface. But then you have all the way through to the manned Mars missions, which would hope to take drones with them and control them on the surface, of course, which would be much more akin to what us hobbyists are used to. Although, of course, the rest of it is completely alien to us, quite literally.
Yeah. So, and when you even think about it, the term drone is the colloquial name for unmanned aerial vehicles, and to that extent, balloons are in some form a type of drone that you could imagine flying on other planets. We've flown balloons on Venus, and in fact, the very first time drones, so to speak, were used, I think goes back to 1849, when the Austrian army was besieging Venice, the city of Venice, and they decided to launch some incendiary balloons to drift over Venice and bomb Venice that way. Of course, it backfired very quickly because the winds shifted and the balloons actually came back onto the Austrians. But the point of this this historical anecdote is to point out that drones are not necessarily the rotorcraft that we are calling drones every day.
Absolutely.
Depending on where you want to fly, you might have a different type of, sort of lift system and propulsion system. So if you think of flying, well, first of all, to use a rotorcraft drone, you need to have an atmosphere. And so a place like Mars has a substantial atmosphere, but it's much thinner than on the Earth. Of course, it's actually the atmospheric pressure on Mars is about 10 millibars. So it's what you have on the Earth at an altitude of about 120,000 feet, or 35 kilometers up. Essentially, it's where jetliners fly, 33,000 feet. Well, at those atmospheric pressures, it's very difficult to generate lift unless you're flying fast.
Absolutely.
Which is why jets go there. Lift, if you recall, is proportional to air density, to the surface area of your airfoil, but also to the square of your airspeed. Okay, so the faster you fly, because any increment in airspeed will give you a factor of squared the benefit. You will, the faster you fly, the better off you are in terms of generating lift. On Mars, because the air is so thin, the atmospheric density is so low, it's about 60 times less than what we have here on the Earth, surface of the Earth, you have to whip your rotorcraft rotors around really fast. Okay, so a typical RPM rate for a helicopter on Earth, I'm talking about a manned helicopter now, or crewed helicopters, is roughly 500 RPMs. On Mars, you essentially have to, the Mars helicopter that's going to be taken to Mars this summer, so it's launching from the Earth this summer, will get there in February of next year. The Mars helicopter, which will be the first time any drone-like vehicle is flown on Mars, that Mars helicopter has rotors that are spinning at around 2,400 RPMs, so about 5 times what typical rotors here on Earth spin at. And that is to compensate for the fact that there's very little air to whip into.
Yes, of course.
And therefore, you have to really go cranking on the RPM.
Indeed.
But at the same time, we could actually have rotors that spin faster. I mean, if you think about it, it's still a staggering rate already, 2,400 RPMs. In a minute, 2,400 rounds. That's really fast.
Indeed.
But we're stopping shy of spinning the rotors faster, mainly because you don't want the tip of the rotor blades to hit the speed of sound. Because that induces a whole bunch of shock wave and then a whole bunch of other issues.
Of course.
Sonic aerodynamics. So in fact we keep a healthy margin from even from the Mach speed of the Martian atmosphere. So we keep it at 0.7 times the speed of sound.
Wow,
Okay,
that's
to
still
stay in a
that's still going some, isn't
clean,
it?
safe zone. But that's 2,400 RPMs. That's what that
Yeah.
will do for you. And the wingspan, so to speak, or the rotor diameter is about 1.2 meters. Okay, so this is a substantial, drone, as it were, already.
Indeed.
Okay, if you look at pictures of this Mars helicopter, you'll notice that the rotors are relatively fat.
Yes.
The blades are, in the sense that you want the airfoil to be as wide as possible, essentially generate more lift. This goes back to the rho v squared times s, proportionality of lift. The greater the S, the surface area of your airfoil, the greater the lift. So you want to maximize the lift of your airfoil that way. And so that's how you design this helicopter. And JPL, the Jet Propulsion Lab Laboratory, is the entity that developed this helicopter.
Yeah. So will they be the ones who continue to design the manned mission drones, or is that sort of their specialist area, as it were? Or
well, any organization that these days that's designing a rotorcraft or an aircraft for any planetary exploration will be in a very good position to compete.
Excellent.
When the time comes to design, anything that a manned mission would use. But JPL did a really fantastic job here at creating this helicopter. And, obviously, because you need big wingspans, you cannot design a drone the way our regular commercial drones are designed, sort of quadricopters. That would take up too much space, essentially.
Of course.
Plus, you're going to be lifting too much dead mass. So it's essentially a single rotor mast system.
Yes. I do actually have a very quick clip to play out to everyone so they can see what we're talking about. It's about 30 seconds, so I'll just play that out very quickly.
Yeah, let's watch that. Mars helicopter.
This is actually the initial tests from the NASA Jet Propulsion Lab, showing it when they're flying within their cage, obviously trying to keep things safe when they're testing, which is of course very important. But this was the pre-model for the one which actually finally is going, and this is her here. And obviously that's a bit of CGI showing it landing on the Mars surface there, which is fantastic. I mean, it's a huge leap forward, isn't it, to be able to actually have a drone as we understand it. I mean that although of course, as you say, it's a single shaft aircraft, it is still recognizable to us as a prop drone. So it's very exciting.
Absolutely. And if you notice, of course, it has two levels of rotors.
Yes.
It's a counter rotating rotor system to compensate for the torque that is induced by the other rotor. Normally in a helicopter, you have a tail boom for that with a tail rotor. Or on a drone, if you notice on your little quadricopter drones, the rotors spin in different directions. So you have ways to compensate for torque. But here, in order to keep things really light and single-masted,
yes,
you essentially have a counter-rotating rotor system. So everything is optimized to minimize mass, to maximize efficiency. I mean, the whole thing weighs, I think less than 2 kilos.
Wow, that's incredible.
Sort of astounding.
Yeah, I mean, certainly when it was flying in the test pen at JPL, it did look quite fragile. Well, obviously it's in its early prototype stages at that point, but yes, I mean, to have that kind of weight is extraordinary. Just very quickly, thank you very much, Val's Life, for your $10 super chat. Always great. I really appreciate that. And anyone in the chat, if you do have a question that you want me to put forward to Pascal, could you please start the question with the @Geeksvana, just so it highlights in the chat, and then just pop your question, and we'll try to get to some questions later. Also, does anybody recognise Pascal's current backdrop? Be interesting to see if anybody can get the reference. Yes, I mean it's It's a good one for the sci-fi geeks out there for sure. So on Devon Island, obviously you're carrying out all of this research. I know that one of the big points of research from our previous chat is the spacesuit, and
Right.
the huge advances that you're making in that.
Yeah. So on Devon Island, we're sort of thinking ahead in the sense that we anticipate that humans will eventually make it to Mars. And that just like we use drones for our field work on Devon Island, human astronauts will want to have drones at their disposal once they get to Mars. So the JPL robotic drone that's being taken to Mars this summer, and again, it will land on Mars in February of next year, is it's a technological demonstration of the idea that we could do that. I mean, even fly anything on Mars or on another world. But then from then on, we anticipate, larger, more sophisticated robotic helicopters to be, proposed by NASA and flown. And then, of course, my dream is down the road, we will see drones supporting astronauts. So I'm not even talking about drone carrier. I mean, astronaut carriers, which is a whole different area of
Indeed.
drone transportation, but just drones as a tool for exploration that astronauts could use. And so what we spent our summer doing, and maybe you have some clip of that.
I do.
Was to come up with an interface that allows you to actually plausibly fly a drone on Mars. And the main issue, of course, is that if you fly drones on the Earth, you are familiar with your usual controller. You have actually a whole wall there behind you of
yes, very, very archaic looking things in comparison. Yes,
it's essentially a full-time job in the sense that it's a two-hand thing. You're joysticking with two hands. You are also staring at a screen that you adapt to a flight controller interface to control your drone. And this whole interface is not going to be practical on a mission to Mars. I mean, astronauts first of all, don't have the dexterity when they're wearing a pressurized spacesuit. A pressurized spacesuit is like being in an inflated bladder. It becomes very rigid, and your fingers would tire very, very quickly if you were trying to sort of joystick things around. So number one, we have to do away with that. Number two, you want something that is not going to require that you stare down at a screen between your hands to fly a drone either. You want something that's more like a head-up display that allows you to, at the same time, stay aware of what's going on around you.
Indeed, which might be a good chance for me just to play out two very short clips. Sorry to interrupt you, which will show people again so they can see what's happening here. And these are the clips of the small DJI craft being used to demonstrate the fantastic work that's happened with the spacesuit glove, which we'll discuss in a moment with Pascal. Clip is showing you the glasses, which it's currently glasses within the helmet, which again helps to give an augmented reality display for the astronaut.
The gimbal is controlled by head motions. The ultimate display will probably not be a set of glasses, but something that you project onto the visor of the astronaut.
Yes, because I remember you were telling me before that there's obviously any to have anything else inside the helmet would obviously potentially cause issues, I suppose, through failure and also, of course, danger as well.
Yeah, you could easily knock off a pair of glasses if you were wearing that by just moving your spacesuit around your body a little bit. So what happened in this sort of the backstory behind this clip is that I was lucky to see a demonstration one day when I was in Oslo last year, when we could still travel. I was lucky to see this demonstration of a remarkable concept that a team of young engineers who were, most of them still in school, came up with. And they actually had a company, a startup called Intention, as in the word intention, but without the I.
Yes.
Intention.
Clever.
And Intention is in my view, a sort of a pioneering company here in the development of intuitive interfaces to allow you to with hand waving motions, control things like robots, drones, even play music.
Wow.
So if you're curious about their tech, you should go to their website, intention.com. And I think you list a link to their website
In the description, yes, I've just popped it into the chat as well.
Yeah. So, remarkable stuff. Anyway, that's when the thought occurred to us that we could adapt that to a spacesuit glove, and let's see how that would work. And that solves a number of issues. You're no longer using both hands to painstakingly joystick a controller. You don't have to stare down at a screen. You have a very simple, intuitive interface, and yet that allows you to really control the drone very well. And so we're envisioning that astronauts on Mars will be able to fly drones with this kind of interface. And of course, the drones will have, many autonomous capabilities. They should be able to take off, land,
absolutely,
yes, avoid obstacles, this and that. But you might still want to take it somewhere to do something that you want it to do without having to spend time, programming it. So, for example, you might want it to collect a sample that might have biological potential that you don't want to touch yourself or even get near. But you could dispatch a pre-sterilized drone to go collect that sample and bring it back to study in a lab, behind a glove box.
Absolutely, yes.
Or you might use it in a search and rescue operation where you've lost somebody somehow, or
yes,
you've lost an asset and you want to go figure out where it is. And Mars is not just flat open area. It's canyons. It can be a maze in many places.
Caves, everything else. Yes, of course.
Yeah, exactly.
And I suppose when you're outside of the hub, the Mars mission hub, time is critical, isn't it? So although, as you say, you will have all of these autonomous modes that the drone can fly many missions on, being able to use it in an adaptive way is going to save you time, and yes, it's going to mean you're outside of the hub for less time, of course.
You bring up a really good point, Sean, because you also don't have to be using it in a spacesuit. You yourself could be in the comfort of a pressurized rover. And be flying your drone that, you dispatch your drone from your rover and then you go scout the surroundings. Or
absolutely.
So you don't have to be necessarily in a spacesuit, but the interface would remain as simple and as elegant as.
Yes.
Never underestimate the importance of elegant design.
Absolutely, because it isn't just. The video clip I showed the I don't want to say it's Brad, isn't it? Brad is the test pilot from the videos. Brandon, that's it. Sorry, I wanted to make sure I got his name correct. But it isn't just the hand movements which are moving it. It's also the fingers, very slight controls of the fingers change certain settings as well, and control the aircraft, which as you say, it is elegant. It is fantastic. I mean, the genius is at Intention. It is a beautiful design, and I've since our last chat, I recommend people do go and look it up, actually, because even seeing it in the conducting music, etc., and that type of thing, the amount of different possibilities they have for that technology in the future is absolutely incredible.
Yes, and we tested it in the context of flying a drone in a spacesuit because, well, we're interested in drones, and that's what they had. But you can imagine you can control a robotic arm this way.
Yes.
Or two robotic arms. You could grip things and move things around, and so there's a huge potential to this kind of very intuitive interface compared to things, from the olden days that are a lot more
Yes,
laborious.
like the things in the background, which seem very archaic when we talk about this type of particular setup. So
I have a bunch of those too, so no, I can relate.
excellent. They all work as well, actually, which always surprises people. They expect them to be the broken ones that are hung up on the wall. Should we cover a couple of questions which people have got in the in the chat? One from one of our regular viewers, Brian Forward. Hi, Brian. Really great to see you. He was asking why not use a blimp rather than a drone.
Well, it's not a bad idea. Blimps are possible on Mars. You can fly them. There's a difference, of course, between blimps and dirigibles. Blimps are essentially balloons. They don't have a skeleton inside. Don't have a rigid structure.
Of course.
And so we actually do think that we will be able to use tethered blimps, for example, as a very, practical and straightforward way of having permanent aerial coverage of where you are. So
Of course.
I actually even have sketches where we have pressurized rovers with a line connecting them to a blimp, where the idea is so that wherever you drive, you can have aerial.
That's fantastic coverage without the issue of
Yeah,
battery
so-
life and everything as well.
Yeah, but otherwise, if you were to let loose a blimp in the Martian atmosphere, well, then now you have the issue of it drifting with the atmosphere of Mars. I mean, it's a balloon, so it's an air mass.
Of course.
Therefore, it travels with the air. Okay, and unless it has a propulsion system on board, which would make it heavier and more complicated, in which case you're better off with a drone or an airplane.
Just strip it back down to being a drone. Yes, absolutely. Because
So,
you're effectively
but,
going to have to build the drone
so-
into the blimp, aren't you, to give it that control? So
Yeah, exactly. But it does take care of your lift issue, and so but again, flying through the Martian atmosphere against the wind, the winds can be fast on Mars. You can easily have 10, 20, 30, 40 knot winds on Mars,
Wow.
if not more.
crikey.
In fact, on dust storms, we think that we are reaching possibly 80 to even 100 knots of wind. Now, unlike in the movie The Martian or the book where
Yes.
an astronaut would be blown over by the wind, the atmospheric density is really so low that you would hardly feel a breeze even with 100-mile-per-hour wind in your face
Wow.
or on your faceplate. But that's because the dynamic pressure of the air mass moving across you remains very low because the air density is very low. But the wind speeds themselves, could be fast.
That's incredible.
So actually, the greatest risk of you being exposed to a dust storm is not so much you being blown over by dynamic pressure, but simply the wind being able to really fly, for example, a dust grain very fast.
Yes.
And if that dust grain hits your visor, at the wrong place, well,
Yes,
it
absolutely.
could inflict damage.
That's quite scary. Darren Kay is asking a question which you probably don't have access to, but he was asking how much the production cost of the quad, which I'm presuming he might mean the Mars helicopter that's going up next year. Do you know the rough budget that someone like JPL would get to develop that?
I actually have been trying to find out myself, and that's a very difficult number to know because it depends on what you take into account.
Absolutely.
There's background research, over many years on the concept versus the specific money that was poured in for that particular, mission. But I know that, and I also know that the tally is not completely done yet because, of course, the mission hasn't been flown.
Of course.
Quite this minute yet. But NASA will produce the numbers, and we will at some point see exactly how much the helicopter
Pour over them.
costs, but
Yes,
I don't happen
indeed.
to have the numbers.
Okay, here's one from Novice Quads, Lawrence. Hi, Lawrence. Good to see you. One of our regular viewers. This one again is very much even leaping further forward than taking drones to Mars. Will we start terraforming Mars before actual man gets there? Now, is terraforming the realms of science fiction, or is there, like a lot of science fiction, is there any truth in that concept?
Terraforming is completely in the realm of fiction.
I
Okay,
thought
let me
it might
repeat
be.
that.
Yes.
Completely in the realm of fiction, because, you know, here it goes. It's not because it's feasible physically that it is actually doable from an engineering standpoint, or desirable. Okay, so and just to get everybody up to speed on this, terraforming is the idea of transforming Mars into another Terra, into another
Yes,
Earth.
thank you.
So, okay, you want to make the place as comfortable to live in as we are here on Earth. Um, you know, so what do we have to do to Mars for that? Well, we have to thicken the Martian atmosphere. We have to change its composition. It's made of CO2 right now. You want it to be made of O2 eventually. But thickening the Martian atmosphere would be one thing. Making it warmer would be another, so that you could start having more liquid water being stable at the surface of Mars. And with liquid water being stable, now you can irrigate the land and, you know, obviously grow things. But you're talking about a progressive, because it has to be progressive. It's not an instantaneous thing. It has a progressive modification of an entire planetary surface environment, which will take thousands of years, okay, hundreds to thousands of years to get
Absolutely.
to the point where you still cannot breathe without a breathing apparatus, okay, without oxygen masks, but where at least you would be in an atmosphere that's thick enough, warm enough, and liquid water would be stable and there'd be plants around you.
Yes,
okay.
absolutely.
But you still have a gaping ozone hole because there's no ozone yet, since there's no oxygen in the atmosphere.
Yes, absolutely.
We on Earth have oxygen in our atmosphere because of the work of cyanobacteria it started to become livable for about 2 billion years.
Wow. It's quite a lot of work.
So terraforming in any case gets you to the point where you have an atmosphere thick enough, but it's still made mostly of CO2. You still need oxygen mass to go outside, but at least you don't need a pressure suit anymore. But it's still going to take hundreds, if not thousands of years, and a huge cost. You know, it's sort of like building cathedrals in the past, where it was an undertaking of not just one generation, but multi-generational thing.
Of course, yes.
But imagine something that would take a substantial chunk of our tax revenue globally, thrown at Mars for decades to hundreds of years, okay, for the sole purpose of one day allowing people to breathe, still with an oxygen mask, but at least without a spacesuit. I think our efforts are better spent achieving interstellar travel.
Absolutely,
And
yes.
going to Earth-like planets around other stars.
No, I agree. I think terraforming is one of those convenient plot points, isn't it? It sounds fantastic. Obviously, when you've got 2 hours of a movie, or you've got a few hundred pages to get your point across, then being able to say we terraformed is a nice convenient plot tool to bring, as you say, sometimes billions of years of evolution down into 20 minutes.
Sean, I actually hate to occasionally find myself in this situation of having to sort of dampen the enthusiasm for science fiction vision, because, you know, I'm also reminded of the fact that you should be very careful, you know, what you call a bad idea. I think I've said this before.
Absolutely,
but
yes.
I credit Arthur C. Clarke for saying, you know, every time you have a novel idea, you should expect 4 stages to people's reaction to it. Stage 1 is they're going to say it's impossible, it's not a good idea. And that's what I'm saying about terraforming right now. Okay, so I'm guilty of that. But then you give it more time, and, you know, the idea moves along, and the reaction becomes in stage 2, well, it's possible, but it's still not a good idea. And then you give it more time. Stage 3, it becomes, okay, it's possible, it's a good idea, and I always knew it. Okay, it's people's reaction to your
yes.
idea. And then in stage 4, it's yeah, that's possible, And I always, and that was my idea.
Yeah,
Okay,
they then
so
make claim indeed.
I don't want to be a naysayer about terraforming.
Yes,
At the risk of somehow being proven really wrong about it.
absolutely, because you don't
But
have to go that
I
far
have to
back, do
say
you,
that,
for it to for other things that
but
would
I
have
have to say
seemed
that
to. Yep, sorry.
it's a lot harder than one might imagine.
Yes.
And there's also the question of, is it even desirable, let alone ethical? If, for example, we found life on Mars, should you leave it alone? Should you let it follow its course? Another approach actually, and that is making maybe faster progress even, is maybe it'd be easier to actually modify the human being, to live on Mars.
Excellent.
Close to how it is today.
Yes.
Could we have avatars of ourselves, or even just, have a CO2 lung somehow? What I'm saying is,
I like that
it's
angle.
so far into the future that now you cannot discount the fact that other technologies could kick in, and rather than terraforming Mars, maybe we should Marsiform humans.
Yes. Have you patented that phrase yet? That should be a trademark there somewhere. Okay. Paul Murray, he is asking what the anticipated life expectancy of the drone, of the Mars helicopter going up, will have. How long do you think it will last?
Well, the Mars helicopter is going to be very progressive and deliberate in its testing. Remember, it's a testing program. We're not even expecting science back from it, although we hope we will get spectacular perspectives. It's supposed to do hops that are no higher than about 5 meters in altitude, although you might get a little bolder towards the end if it performs well. But for now, it's just 16 feet flights. About 90 seconds per flight.
Okay,
if we can pull that off. So it's a minute and a half, and we don't expect it to go much further than 50 to 300 meters per flight. The first hop, I think, is about a meter. I'm quoting from memory here. I might be wrong, but it's a tiny hop. It's just to see that the thing can lift itself off, translate, and then come back down.
Yeah, I mean that's still pretty impressive for our first drone flight on Mars. It's going to be
another world.
It's going to be a very exciting few seconds.
Needless to say, it's done entirely autonomously because you cannot control it.
Absolutely.
The detail that I enjoy telling about this thing is that the flight will take place at around 11 in the morning.
Right.
Okay. And the reason why we choose 11 in the morning is because, well, if it's too early in the morning, it's still too cold. The electronics are too cold. The batteries in particular are too cold. So you want the batteries to have time to warm
Of course, yes.
And a bit of power to recharge from the solar panel to top it off.
Excellent.
If you will.
Yes.
But then you don't want to fly in the afternoon, because in the afternoon, the atmospheric density, as the atmosphere warms up, becomes thinner. You are at higher density altitude in the afternoon. So you want so 11 a.m. is roughly the optimal time to get started. Now, I think the engineers plan to fly the helicopter, at different times of the day down the road, including maybe at sunset. Okay.
Wow.
Exactly. But for now, it's going to be very conservative and one little step at a time.
Yeah, absolutely, because those first flights will have to be in the absolutely primary set of parameters to of course ensure they get some flights, to get some kind of proof of concept, as you say, to know what's actually happening. Addy Overbeek has asked, will Pascal... Yeah. I think you might know Addy. Do you know Addy from? Yeah.
He's a spacesuit engineer. He used to be a spacesuit engineer. He's
yes, indeed. Now, yeah. He actually commented on our original interview, and I learned almost as much from his comments as I did from the interview. Actually, it was fascinating. Will Pascal be doing more testing with the drone and EMU this summer field?
Yes. So of course we don't know yet if we will be able to get back to Devon Island. Right now, travel into Canada is restricted. Once you're in Canada, travel into Nunavut, which is the territory of this part of the Arctic where we have to go to, is also restricted to residents only. We're not residents. so a number of things have to fall into place in time for us to go up there, but we're still keeping options open to go there sometime between August and September.
Excellent.
And if we don't do it this year, we'll do it next year. We plan to have a new spacesuit.
Fantastic.
I don't think I've announced that anywhere.
Oh.
Just leave it at
And
that. But since Addy is a spacesuit engineer, he will appreciate that. So we plan to have a new spacesuit. And so the answer to his question is yes. We hope to have a new spacesuit and do more of the testing that we did last time with the new spacesuit now. And what we will vary is sort of the complexity of the tasks. Okay, so last time we just did some flying around.
Yes.
With the drone, next time we will start doing things like collecting a sample. Okay, and I will leave it at that.
Absolutely, yes. Thank you. I'm dying to ask you more, but thank you for the small exclusive. But I will take you away from the new spacesuit conversation now. Steve Carpenter, hi Steve, thanks for joining us. He's asking what the payload capacity of the drone that Dr. Pascal and team are looking for. So I think here he's talking about the future manned missions. What kind of payload are you expecting or hoping that drone will be able to carry?
Well, we don't know yet. So a lot actually will depend on the performance of the current helicopter on Mars. It's already been published that JPL is thinking of the next generation helicopter beyond this one. And the next time around, we might have something that can carry a payload of 1 or 2 kilos.
Excellent. That's exciting.
Maybe a little more even. But at some point, well, even projected into the future, aerodynamics are not really going to change. So to lift anything big, you're going to need bigger and bigger airfoils and still spin them fast. Okay, so now you're talking about a real hazard in the context of having humans around. Okay, not to mention that one of the things we're curious about on Mars is at what point does dust that you kick up at takeoff and landing, at what point does that become a real issue?
Of course. Okay. Yes.
The dust on Mars gets, of course, blown around by the winds, we know, but it also adheres to itself and to things. So it's sort of sticky dust to some extent. And we're trying to figure out, hey, are we going to need a landing pad and a takeoff pad for drones in the future, or can they really be deployed anywhere in this desert?
No, indeed.
So there are lots of practical questions that still have to be solved. Now, one of the reasons why I got interested also in drones is because they are ideal for exploring caves, okay, especially on other worlds. When you think about it, right now we design rovers to drive across a stretch of terrain on Mars, but we sort of know what the terrain is like on Mars. We know that it's rocky. Yes. We have remote sensing, imaging to select the landing site. We know what the rover has to be prepared for. But if you go into a cave like a lava tube, where you now have a tunnel with just a very narrow entrance, who knows what it's like inside? Is it, very rocky with sharp, spiky rocks? Is there ice in there? Is it, sandy flats? We have no idea. And so going in with a rover, it becomes very risky because anything like a rover has to interact intimately with the terrain. Whereas a drone is sort of the touchless approach to exploration.
Absolutely.
And as long as it keeps flying, and doesn't touch the walls, and you can
Yes.
do drones that do that, you're all set. So drones are a very promising approach for exploring caves in a place like Mars or Titan. Okay. The problem, though, with caves on Mars is that the caves that we know of right now are all at very high altitude. They are on the flanks of the giant volcanoes of Mars, these lava tubes that we'd like to go explore. They are fascinating places to explore because these volcanoes might still be active today. We don't know. I mean, they're not erupting, but they're not necessarily extinct.
Until you get in
they
there,
could be dormant.
Absolutely.
And so there could be some warmth still coming out of the volcanoes. The caves on their flanks could be incredible places to search for life, even life that could be alive today. And so I want to go into the caves of
Absolutely.
Martian volcanoes. Okay, so do you. Right. But now you are too high in altitude, because we're talking about altitudes of order +8 to +20 kilometers. Okay. Even more than that. At times, we're at very high altitude, and so even a rotorcraft like the Mars helicopter would not be able to take off at such a high altitude.
Of course, yes.
So now we'd be looking at the type of solution that we're thinking about for caves on the moon, which is a rocket thrustered, or cold gas thrustered, a propellant thrustered flyer.
Yes.
Follow the drone too, but now you're no longer looking at rotors. It's not interacting with any atmosphere to speak of. It's a little jetpack.
So would that then require two types of drone essentially being taken on a manned mission? Because it would be, of course, the thrust propelled drones on the moon as well, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. The same situation.
There are other ways we're working on. To explore caves on the moon as well that are not sort of really like a drone. But drones are and remain an intriguing solution, and especially a solution that would carry forward quite well with Mars.
Absolutely. Just very quickly, I just want to thank a couple of people. Darren K, thank you very much for your $5 super chat. He wants to say thank you to Dr. Pascal Lee and Sean for fascinating and informative only on Geeksvana YouTube. Thank you, sir. Metrodones, a $10 super chat. Happy Tuesday, droners. Hope everyone is well. I'm very well, sir. Thank you. Trying to survive the lockdown over here in London at the moment, but it's obviously all for extremely good reason. Many people in the chat have spotted the 2001 reference in the background. By the way, they did manage to guess that, which is a fantastic reference. Okay, I'm just going to play out a couple more clips very quickly as we're moving on to the caves, etc. These are the clips you very kindly sent me in our previous interview, explaining the LiDAR side of things, and looking to obviously scan these shoots so much more quickly. So I'll just play those out very quickly for the audience.
Okay, position 100% disarmed. You ready for recording?
Can you back up a little bit?
Oh, that's in our cave in Iceland.
Oh, wow.
Okay, recording?
That's fantastic.
It's a lava tube, and it's full of ice. I don't feel.
Very carefully landing back on the icy floor. And then one last short clip which shows the actual the data produced essentially, which obviously one huge advantage there, of course, is as we were discussing before, the speed mode, the speed obviously that this is able to map at. As opposed to the more traditional way of doing things. Because, of course, as you were saying, the drones will provide such an important exploration tool from the point of view of safety and, of course, time. Because, as we were saying before, the time spent outside of the Mars hub is going to be very precious. So if you can go and do a mission like scan some tubes very, very quickly, of course, it's going to give them that much more data, but in a much more safe format.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it, Sean. Well, what you just saw there really should be credited to Astrobotic. It's a space startup. They're actually one of the companies that NASA selected to help us get to the moon commercially. So Astrobotic is interested in doing things like LiDAR-borne or drone-borne LiDARs. And so what you saw here was a drone that actually was flown inside this lava tube, inside this cave, without any GPS guidance, because you're in this cave, you don't see satellites, you are underground. And within minutes, this drone, which carries a LiDAR, was able to essentially map. So think of a LiDAR as a laser radar. It essentially maps the surroundings, the walls, the ceiling, the floor of the cave, and it lands back down. And so what you saw at the very end here was a projection of this underground tunnel that expands in two directions from that entrance hole that's at the very surface there of Iceland.
Yes, which literally almost looks, it is the old iceberg thing, isn't it? Really, that tiny skylight.
Yeah.
There's just so much going on down there, which of course is so exciting when you look at the surface of Mars and you think what could be going on under those caves, etc.
And it has to be said that, you know, on Earth, okay, a cave is all right. We understand that it's an environment that's different from what's at the surface. But a cave is, you know, for most geologists who study volcanoes, a cave is a sort of a geologic curiosity. It's not radically creating an opportunity to change your view on the science of, you know, of your volcano.
Absolutely.
On Mars, it's very different, okay, and even on the Moon, because what a cave does on these places is that it creates an environment that's much more sheltered and favorable to life as we know it than the surface is. The surface of Mars is lethal to any form of life known on Earth. Okay, it's super cold, it's super dry, it's drenched in ultraviolet light. I mean, the intensity of ultraviolet light at the surface of Mars is 800 times what it is at the surface of the Earth. Okay, so
that's incredible.
I mean, there's no ozone essentially.
Yes.
You have a global ozone hole, so that's what it does for you. You know, et cetera, et cetera. And then you have ionizing radiation coming in from deep space and the sun. All of these things are bad news. Scientists call this biocidal factor. Like homicide is when you kill a human. Biocide is when you kill anything that's alive.
Right. Yes. So it's a few
factors.
levels up.
Exactly. You generalize the concept. So the Martian surface environment is a biocidal environment, and a cave in a place like Mars or the Moon are havens, are precious havens that life could seek refuge in or even evolve, protected from these lethal biocidal factors. And this is why it's so intriguing for us to try to get access to these caves on the Moon and Mars, because they are really worth it. They're going to take you to a place that's very different from what you have at the surface from the standpoint of the possibility of life.
Absolutely. It's a fascinating thing, and there's one video which I am going to find and link into the chat at some point, which was actually your explanation of the Drake equation, which I found absolutely fascinating. The short TED talk you gave, because it fascinated me that someone was able to bring that much science into a very short speech, into a very short talk, at the point where I walked away actually probably for the first time really understanding exactly what that meant. So I will find that. I know there is a short and a long version, isn't there? There's which I think your longer version was just over 2 hours, I think.
Yeah. Yes.
But there we go.
I hope that's not the one you're showing.
No, I have found it actually, which I will just I will put that as a link in the description for everybody to have a look at later. I did also put the Astrobiotic website link in there for people that want to go along and learn more there, because as you say, they're an exciting company, and there are so many companies like that, and it's one of the things that I have found fascinating about learning about HMP and the Mars Institute and everything, is actually it isn't necessarily how you would imagine it in your own mind. You know, especially with Hollywood and everything else, you imagine the space race. and you imagine, America, China, Russia, everybody racing, and of course that is happening to a certain extent, of course, but projects like the Haughton Mars projects and your own Mars Institute, etc., is much more of a mix, isn't it, of companies and nations and everyone putting together to get us out there.
Yep. It's humanity hopefully going in peace together.
Which is, especially with everything that's happening at the moment, it's fantastic to see just how closely different nations, different companies can work, and you can still keep that competition level there. So there's still space for people to make money, but still work in a very humanistic way to get us out there, which is absolutely fantastic. Let me just bring up a couple more of the questions. Are you okay for time?
Oh yeah.
Wonderful, thank you.
I'm on my way to Jupiter, according to my backdrop. So
yes, indeed.
It's a 4-year flight.
You might need to get some stasis sleep at some point, though.
My bed is right behind me.
That's fantastic. A short hop. One thing that Brant Ariels actually, hi Gary, Brant Ariels, good to see you. One thing he raises is regarding the Transport Canada permissions to test flights in the Canadian airspace, etc. Do you have to? I've always imagined HMP to be some kind of specialist zone that is outside of the normal permissions. Do you have to adhere to local drone laws and that type of thing?
Oh yeah, we certainly do.
Wow.
We seek permission from Transport Canada. In fact, if you look at the end of our videos, I think we even acknowledge Transport Canada for their support. They've been very supportive and making things, I mean, obviously within the framework of the law, but easy paperwork wise to get permission to do this. So of course, this is because it's research. Devon Island itself is the largest uninhabited island on Earth. So right there, that's a good start.
Yes.
And it's Class G airspace, everywhere.
Yes.
So
it is remote from every sense, isn't it? Really. So it's so remote. In fact, if you go across to Pascal's YouTube channel and watch the videos in full, which are fascinating, you even have is it Apollo, the polar bear dog that's up there?
Yeah.
So and that's a polar bear guard dog. Oh, is this Apollo?
Yeah, I think I have him with me on this flight.
He made it up there.
Okay, he was sleeping. So
oh, bless him. Yeah, and he's a polar bear guard dog. Is that right?
Well, he's an Australian cattle dog, so from a breeding history standpoint, he's very far from being a polar bear guard dog. But he's a herding dog, and he's very alert and also very curious about anything around him. So what we expect the dog to do is not attack the polar bear or anything. We just expect it to alert us.
Absolutely.
And that I'm very confident that Apollo will do.
That's brilliant.
And so it would alert us that there's something approaching. And then the other thing is, in case in case my dog did go towards the bear or mutually they came close, I know Apollo would distract it by just running around it like you would a herd
absolutely
of cat.
Yes.
Okay.
He has that instinct inside him, doesn't he?
At the risk of annoying the bear, but
yes, indeed.
It would buy us a little bit of time.
It just shows that it's one of those areas of work where there are literally no passengers. Even the cute dog in the video has a key job, which is fantastic.
I sort of like the idea that a cattle dog is fundamentally a desert dog. So this is just a different desert. It happens to be cold and dry, but it's a desert dog.
Fantastic. Let me have a look. If there's any other very quick questions. Yes, Chris Hope, there's some links in the description which will take you to Pascal's channel and also to some of the other clips we've seen, including the YouTube channel of NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory, which is fascinating because they also show the Mars copter in its different stages. as it's actually built up. And as you were saying before, it isn't about the cost of one project. Because arguably you could say the cost of the next helicopter with the 2 kilogram payload is somewhere in this helicopter as well, isn't it? Of course, because without this helicopter, that helicopter wouldn't exist. And what fascinates me are the leaps forward that seem to happen between every rover. If you lined each of the rovers that have gone anywhere out there, the technology that has jumped between them is just almost mind-blowing, isn't it? The leaps these things take. And is that with Perseverance that helicopter's going up with?
Correct. So Perseverance used to be called Mars 2020 and now has a name, this new rover. The previous one was Curiosity. Now this one is called Perseverance. And incidentally, the way Perseverance is going to deploy the helicopter is attached to the belly of Perseverance.
Okay.
And when we get to a spot where we think the helicopter will be happy taking off from, Perseverance will essentially lower the helicopter onto the surface, drive away by driving over it. And then once Perseverance is at a safe distance, the helicopter will take off, and then they will take a mutual selfie.
Fantastic. What a very modern mission to to give these things. I thought the naming side of things was very clever by NASA this time. Obviously with the competition, the young man who named Perseverance. Watching his little video that NASA put up congratulating him was fascinating to have people of that generation.
Exactly, a school kid named Perseverance and a school girl named. A schoolboy named Perseverance, a schoolgirl named
the helicopter.
Yes. The helicopter is called Ingenuity.
There you go. Yes,
Ingenuity.
Fantastic. It's just fantastic. I loved the young man's T-shirt. He had a NASA T-shirt on, but it said geek or either geek or nerd instead of NASA, and I thought that was just fantastic. It's great to see the minds and how the minds are working, and his reasons for calling it Perseverance I thought were very good, with obviously the fact that others have covered human strengths, and he felt Perseverance was the one that was missing. I thought that was just such a spot on way of naming such an important leap forward for us. When do you personally see manned missions to Mars taking place?
Well, NASA right now, just talking about NASA, is focused on getting humans back to the moon.
Yes.
If everything goes as currently planned, this is happening in the next few years. So we're talking 2024, 2025, somewhere in there.
Wow.
And then as we, of course, not just return to the moon for the sake of leaving footprints, but build up an infrastructure on the moon, probably a small base at the surface of the moon, I anticipate that we will also be doing more and more deep space missions. And I do think that the right way to go to Mars, because beyond that horizon, NASA is looking at various options for sending people to Mars. There's no single plan yet.
Excellent.
But I do like the option where we would go to Mars orbit first, not worry too much about landing on Mars, but just to go to Mars orbit and back. A little bit like Apollo 8 and Apollo 10 were concerned about going to the moon and back, but not worrying too much about landing.
Which of course, yes, I mean that makes the whole thing so much more achievable, and that's a fascinating way to look at it, because presumably they would be able to. There will be scientific experiments that they could carry out from orbit.
I think there would be, and then once you're in orbit, you could visit the moons of Mars, which are fascinating. In fact, I'm going to change my backdrop
there we go.
Being in orbit around Mars, and on final approach to Phobos, the inner moon of Mars, which is only 27 kilometers long. Okay, so the reason why well, first of all, these moons are fascinating. We don't know what they are. They are places we could visit that would be very exciting. I sometimes hear the argument that, well, psychologically it would be so damaging for astronauts to travel for so many months in space, get all the way to Mars, and end up not landing.
Yes.
I really dispute that argument. I think, for one thing, I would go. Just for the view of
Yes,
Mars, of being able to
absolutely.
go on Mars.
Yes. I think the volunteer list would
And
be very long.
2.5 years for a round trip. So what? I mean,
Perhaps
there's air
those
to
views will
breathe.
change once we're out of a prolonged lockdown and people are a little bit more used to
Yeah,
having to stay in our
to what
homes for months.
isolation,
Yes.
how survivable it is. Exactly. So I think that early missions uh, should not discount the value and attractiveness and feasibility, above all,
Yes.
of missions to Mars orbit and back. And then would follow, of course, the first landing and the next landing, etc. And so hopefully NASA will be in a position to do this, as it has been planning now for several years to do that, which is, by the late 2030s to early 2040s. Okay.
Okay. Is that one of
Now,
your own artwork pieces behind you, by the way? I just have to
yeah,
ask
actually,
for a quick. Okay,
it's
excellent.
it's not out yet. It's a
Oh,
painting in progress, but it's
fantastic.
called Final Approach to Phobos.
It's pascallee.net, isn't it, for your artwork?
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm just
yeah.
going to put that link in the chat as well, and it just shows the skill base that is there. It is absolutely fascinating. That
I wasn't actually planning on showing this one, but I had it as a background. Ready
yeah,
for
it's
the
looking
talk.
good. It's looking very good, Phobos.
But landing on Mars, of course, will be the very exciting point, but it should be done in stages. And then I see little point in going to Mars for a very short stay. Well, at least for the early missions, we can do that. But the real goal that we should have on Mars is set up a base there. Okay, in my view. So we should have an international space station essentially on the ground on Mars. That should be our goal. That will get many countries on board. It will set us up a bit like we are set up in Antarctica to really study Antarctica
Absolutely.
properly with research stations. We would have an international base. The UK has 3 Antarctic stations.
Wow. I didn't know that, actually.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
So we should have Antarctic bases. I mean, in that we should have a Mars base like we do have Antarctic bases, and crew them permanently eventually.
Yes, I know one of NASA's things that they're talking about at the moment is whenever they talk about the moon now, they're always very careful in their press releases to say going back to the moon to stay. This
Right.
time it's not just a race to the moon or a point to prove. They really do, as you say, they want to be able to populate it in the
Return to
sense
the
of a
moon to
base.
stay. And also, the point is made that we're not just sending the next man to the moon. We're sending the first woman and the next man to the moon.
That's fantastic, absolutely fantastic. Now, Titan, is Titan one of Mars's moons?
Now, Titan
Jupiter.
is a moon of Saturn.
Saturn.
Actually.
Third
Even
time lucky.
farther out. No, that's okay. That's okay. It's Titan is a moon of Saturn. It's one of the largest moons in the solar system. It has an atmosphere. It has a very thick atmosphere. The atmosphere of Titan is thicker than Earth's.
Wow.
Which is astounding.
Wow.
It's made of nitrogen mostly, and a bit of methane. It's a tiny bit of hydrogen, but it's mostly nitrogen. And the surface pressure on Titan is 1.5 times the Earth's atmospheric pressure.
Crikey.
So it's a substantial atmosphere. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. But of course, being so far from the sun and Saturn itself not putting out much heat, let alone Titan, it's a very cold place. So even though you have a thick atmosphere, it's so cold. The temperature on Titan is about minus 180 degrees C.
That's even hard to contemplate.
Degrees C.
Yeah.
So you can see the challenge of flying anything there. Obviously, you don't have solar panels anymore. The Mars helicopter is charged with solar panels. And now you need a little nuclear power pack, if you will, on board, and that's what NASA plans to have it. It's an
Yes.
RTG, a radioisotopic thermal generator.
Whilst we're talking, I will just play a very short clip of the Dragonfly drone, which is why we're bringing up Titan in itself. Just turn that music down a little bit there. Which, as you say, is going to be able to fly there, of course, relatively simply in terms of taking drones to other planets, because of course the atmosphere is more amenable to drone flight, which is fascinating. They're actually saying that am I right in thinking that it actually takes less energy to take the craft across the surface than it does even necessarily of the Earth?
Yeah, it's 40 times more efficient, basically, to fly on Titan than it is on the Earth. One, the atmosphere is denser, so you have more lift right there.
Of course.
Second, the gravity is lower, substantially lower, and so this thing, the Mars helicopter has to be kept very light. It's less than 2 kilos. This thing is going to weigh something like 900 pounds, almost 1,000 pounds. I mean,
Wow.
it's 450 kilos.
That's incredible.
So this is a big. I mean, 450 kilos is heavy.
Yes, absolutely.
And it has, of course, nuclear power on board, 4 rotors, a battery of instruments. It can survive and stay warm for several Titan nights. Okay, a night on Titan is about 8 Earth days. So it's, you have to sort of stay warm at those temperatures. Not that the daylight brings you really any significant warmth anyway.
Yes.
But you sort of stay on the ground. You're not flying. You're in darkness. So you stay put for 8 Earth days and then you fly. And the idea is that this thing will will have a maximum range of roughly 100 miles. So maybe 150 kilometers or so. It would have a range of about 8 kilometers a day.
Wow.
Something like that. So we're going to really explore Titan.
That's a lot of suddenly an awful lot of the surface to cover, isn't it? They're going to be able to pick up samples because the drone's actually going to land and drop probes into the surface, isn't it? And
right. So it's supposed to land, collect samples, analyze them. It's not really supposed to leave things behind. Okay.
Of course, yes.
But what's really fascinating about Titan, of course, is that it's not solid surface everywhere. There are bodies of liquid. There are oceans of ethane and or lakes, at least, of ethane, or seas of ethane. There are, it's so cold that water ice, which is present, is essentially behaving like a rock. So we might have mountains of water ice as well there. It's going to be just an amazing thing. It's launching in 2026.
Indeed.
Right? So it's in the works right now. It's being designed, being built. It's launching 2026. It will get to Titan and land there, I think, in 2034.
Wow. Okay. That's a mission, isn't it? That really is how on earth do you plan for a mission like that? That its delivery time is many years. You're going to have people crossing over between careers, aren't you? You're going to be having some people retiring and others picking it up.
I have a lot of admiration for the scientists and engineers who are behind the concept and the mission. First of all, they've been brewing this for many years. It's a Titan scientist called Ralph Lorenz who first proposed the use of a rotorcraft drone to explore Titan back in the year 2000. And over time, it went through the phases of the Arthur C. Clarke thing.
Wow. Yes.
No, it's not a good idea. No, it's not possible. And then now, of course, many people claim credit for the idea, but it's a testament to precisely the perseverance of scientists and engineers behind concepts like this.
No, it's absolutely.
And of course,
fascinating.
Once it will be happening, it will make total sense that this was the right thing to do.
Yeah. No. Indeed.
I should emphasize that I'm not a member of any one of these teams. I'm just a a scientist who happens to be following those efforts and admiring them. But
You're just, yes, yeah.
Titan is going to take it's essentially a career-defining mission. People who will make that happen will have spent the bulk of their professional lives working on this. Yeah.
Can I ask you one final question with your SETI hat on as a senior planetary scientist? Do you believe that there is life out there? You have to know this question's going to come up, even though it's a droning channel. Do you believe that there is other life out in the universe?
Okay, let me explain this succinctly. First of all, we don't know. There's no data right now whether or not there is life out there or not. So it's anybody's guess. And what we try to do at this stage is to have educated guesses. Educated not by data of, the presence or not of life on other planets, but educated by what we know of life on Earth, the course of history of life on Earth, the factors that influence evolution and the persistence of life, etc. So my short answer, therefore, is that I think that the life in microbial form, in the form of tiny microscopic microbes, things you can't see, bugs, viruses, that's got to be common, not just in the galaxy, which is the swarm of stars we're all part of, but even in our own solar system. I would not be surprised if we found alien microbes living inside Mars today, underground, inside the volcanoes. I would not be surprised if there were microbes in the oceans of Europa.
Wow.
I wouldn't be surprised if we found microbes in the oceans of another moon of Saturn called Enceladus, which has, very, very deep oceans as well. But that's microbial life.
Yes.
And our galaxy, which is, all the other stars around us and their planets, I wouldn't be surprised if it was teeming with microbial life in many places. Okay. But then the reason why I think that is because microbial life appeared on Earth very, very early. In fact, in the oldest rocks that we have in our fossil records that were ever in contact with liquid water, these rocks, or formed in the presence of liquid water, there are signs of life in them. So life appeared very, very quickly. It's almost as if geologically speaking, it happened automatically. Like everywhere where we find ancient rocks going back almost to the formation of the Earth that were laid down in the presence of liquid water, we find different kinds of evidence of life in them. Okay. So to me, microbial life might not be extraordinary. It probably pops up.
Absolutely.
Pretty much, wherever you have liquid water for a substantial amount of time.
Yes, indeed.
Okay. Earth type life.
Well, yeah. Sorry, carry on.
I was going to say, but things like us, like
yes.
humans, things that we would describe as intelligent, not because we're that arrogant, but just because what we mean by that is capable of technology, of transmitting signals, well, that's right. So anything that would be as smart as we are or smarter, that is likely, in my view, to be very rare, much rarer than what we think. And in fact, the fact that we're finding planets around every star doesn't really make much of a difference, because that was the assumption before anyway, that there were many planets around other stars, okay? Except that now we know.
Yes.
But the presence of intelligent life is likely to be very rare because it took so long, even on Earth, for it to appear. It doesn't look like it was a driving imperative in the evolution of life. Dinosaurs ruled the Earth for, about several hundred million years without
Absolutely.
finding the need to create a space program.
Yes.
Okay. Which, of course, was their ultimate downfall.
Indeed, yes.
They had a space program. Okay. But what I'm trying to get at here is it took us 4.5 billion years for somehow life to come up with something like a technologically capable form of life. And to me, if you apply that, if the Earth is representative of the time things take, and that's a big if. We don't know. It's
Yes,
the
no,
only
indeed.
example.
Yes,
But at least it's a data point.
it is.
Okay. If the Earth is representative of that, well, then you do the math of the Drake equation, which gives you the number of advanced civilizations in our galaxy right now, and the number is 1. It's roughly 1, with huge error bars, granted. Could be 10, it could be 100, okay, but it's the number comes to 1. Roughly.
Yes.
Meaning that it's either us and we're alone, or there's another one that's sort of like us, or a little more advanced, more likely. Because we've just reached this stage, so a lot of likelihood they are a little more advanced. And if there's only one other, the galaxy is about 100,000 light years across. Split that in half. The other civilization would be roughly 50,000 light years away, on average. Well, 50,000 light years away means that if you even send a signal to them right now, today, it will take 50,000 years to get to them. And if they care to answer, it will take another 50,000 years to come back. Okay. We are essentially alone. So my view on this is not necessarily the most popular view at the SETI Institute, as you can imagine. Okay.
Indeed.
To summarize, I think that civilizations per galaxy are very few. Okay, 1, maybe 2. But hey, there are 100 billion, at least 100 billion galaxies in the universe.
Absolutely.
Well, even if each one had only one civilization that's like us or more advanced, that's still 100 billion civilizations out there.
Yes.
So the universe could be, teeming with smart people designing smart drones, but they are at least a galaxy away, if not more.
Probably having somewhere, and perhaps in one of those rare occasion, someone's having a fairly similar conversation, wondering if we exist as well. Of course, you have to.
Sure.
That kind of thing always blows my mind. But yeah, so
physical issue. But that's not to say that we shouldn't search. That's not to say that we shouldn't be listening.
Absolutely.
And I actually, of course, support that effort. I just think that our expectations should be lowered. I'm not surprised we haven't heard anything. That is consistent with the fact that we'd be,
yes,
isolated.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, Carl Sagan used to say jokingly that the surest sign that there's intelligence out there is that they haven't tried to contact us.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, because
beyond the joke, I think that we would have heard from them by now. If somehow our own galaxy was a place that sort of was like a Star Trekian or Star Warsian universe, where within a galaxy, civilizations get together at galactic bars.
Yes.
And played music.
Convenient plot points again, isn't it? Really, it's.
I think we live in a place that's a lot more isolated than we think.
Indeed, and there's nothing saying if we did ever come across any other life form that just our very presence with each other could actually end up ending each other's civilizations, of course, etc. So you
sure
the fact that there might be some out there, as others have rightly or not rightly said or have put forward, perhaps it's a good idea they stay out there and we stay within our own zones. You never know how that would end up, of course. So.
Yep.
Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us this evening. I cannot thank you enough for all of your
thank you, Sean.
Generosity and time. I really appreciate it. I know how busy you must be, and thank you for answering the questions of everybody here as well. Leaves me just to say thank you very much to everybody in the chat as well. I appreciate you coming along and joining us. Apologies for the small technical issues in the beginning, but I really do appreciate you guys being here. We'll just play out our end message here, and then we'll be off air. Thank you very much, guys.
Okay,
thank you,
that's
John.
a wrap.
Talk to you
the
later.
Story has been told. Until next week, of course. Anyway, if you don't mind picking up your popcorn box, sir, I'd really appreciate you putting it in the bin. Yes, and your crisp packet, madam.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you.
And clean up after these boys. I don't need to clean up after you guys too. Bye!